Hello out there, this is Toy Customizer Wakeangel2K1, and I was enjoying my day off with a nice pleasant shopping trip when I would stumble across a certain something. That's right folks, it's the Silver Super Poseur, finally available in retail stores. So you can actually go down to your local Toys R Us and not have to pay Toy Wiz's ridiculous shipping prices anymore. So the silver figure comes in the standard packaging that all the Super Poseurs come in. In fact, very standard. Aside from a slightly different bubble, it's in fact completely identical to just about any other. Well, okay, there's this generic paragraph about Sonic, and the same stock pictures of Sonic on every side. Except for this little tag up here saying silver, it's pretty much the exact same packaging that any other Super Poseur will come in regardless of the character. I kind of wish that they would spend the extra 35 cents to print out some unique graphics, and that way the card itself would add to the collector's value, but as it stands, it's just a different figure in the same packaging. But what's really important is what's inside the packaging, right? So let's get him out of there and see what it's like. So here is Silver the Super Poseur, and right out of the packaging, I encountered a problem that a lot of people seem to have with the Super Poseur line. And that is Ragdoll Leg Syndrome. Yeah, I don't know, but as you can see, these leg joints, they are nowhere near tight enough to support the head. I mean, Sonic figures generally have large heads, so you would think that ensuring that the hip and knee joints are tight enough to support all that weight would be a high priority when you're making toys of them. Apparently not. Which is a shame, because other than that, everything's pretty good on him. The sculpt is actually quite good, and I like all of the joints. So let me just fix the backdrop here. Fortunately, despite the loose leg joints... Stop proving me wrong! Fortunately, despite the loose joints, the silver figure is balanced enough that he can stand pretty well as long as his legs are, you know, flat in the ground. So let's take a quick breakdown of his articulation. Just like Sonic and Shadow, the head spines are movable for whatever good that does you. He has a swivel head, swivel waist, universal shoulders that go out and forwards just fine. Holy crap, his arm is backwards. There we go. Okay, an elbow that goes 90 degrees, a wrist swivel, a wrist hinge, which can go in, and it can go out. So he can at least hold up his hands in that iconic, psychic pose. Although the elbow joint's not tight enough to actually hold it there. Unless he's proving me wrong when he does. The hand also has a hinge, although it doesn't really do much. I don't know why it's there aside from that's just a typical articulation point that Super Poseurs have. It only gets about this much range and it doesn't really do anything for the pose. So I don't know why they bothered. Also, if you let's take a closer look. If you look in the shoulder, you can see it's a kind of joint that has no visible pin, and yet the elbow does have a visible pin. I don't know why they didn't bother to standardize that. Why didn't they make all the joints have no visible pin? I don't know, this silver figure feels like a pile of compromises. It might have something due to the fact that Jazzwares is expecting to lose the license to Takara Tomy. Although I really hope not, because if there's one more Super Poseur I'm hoping to see, it's Amy Rose. And I feel they kind of need to have that, because Amy is really one of the only important characters left in the cast. I mean, a Super Poseur Eggman would also be nice, just to have one at this scale. But, yeah, Amy Rose, just to round out the important Sonic cast. I mean, I would think that Amy is a character who's been around so much longer, is at least slightly more deserving of a Superposer character than Silver is. Anyway, continuing the articulation breakdown. You have hips. When they're not ragdolling on you, they are designed to be universal. They do go in the proper direction that hips are supposed to go in, primarily forward, and they only rotate outwards. He has a knee that goes about 90 degrees, and he has a swivel at the boot cut, and then he has like two joints right next to each other. Like here in the top of the foot, he has a point that goes there, and then he has a toe that can toe. So, you know, his articulation is actually really good. I mean, the only thing that you might want to add are probably bicep and knee swivels, which... Wait, can I do this? Can I actually pull this off? Silver, if you can pull this off, I'll stop joking about your loose hips. Nope. Maybe by the grace of the posing gods, you might be able to pull this off. Yeah, I'm gonna seriously have to tighten up those joints because they can joint, but they are very loose. And aside from a bunch consider the 3-inch Silver. It's true this guy's a lot bigger, and he does have hand articulation, which is useless because it only goes this far. Like, ooh, look at me, I can hand. All those extra joints in the feet, I guess, can give him more dynamic standing poses, but with the lack of bicep and elbow bicep and knee swivels like the 3-inch figure has, yeah, I don't know. I feel like the 3-inch figure actually may have more posing options, and not just because his hips are actually tight enough to hold his substantial weight. Alright, so that's a breakdown of his articulation. It's not bad articulation. It's actually quite good articulation. If the joints in the legs were only a bit tighter, then it would be fine. Unfortunately, the legs are not tight, so that is a big flaw. Another good thing I can say about Silver is his really nice sculpt and paint application. All of his details are wonderfully done and picked out. There's really nothing on him that I feel missed out on paint. He has everything he needs. He has the rings on his gloves, both on the back and on the palm. There's a little bit of a paint flub there on the glove cuff, but it's not so bad that it's annoying. And he has all the sculpting from the way his chest fur goes all the way around his back, and even every detail of his shoe. The only part that's missing paint app is the sole of the shoe. But even there, at least the details of the shoe are actually sculpted in, which is something. I mean, the only Silver that ever had painted soles was the absolute first release of the 3-inch figure, and ever since then they've just been sculpting that stuff in without actually painting it. But it's nice to know that they at least did that, because if you recall the feet of the Sonic and Shadow Superposers, they don't really capture the details of the sole the way they should. So I showed a comparison of him next to the 3-inch Silver. So how does he hold up next to the other Superposers? Does he look good with them in terms of scale and, fidelity? Well, let's just take a quick look. As you can see, it would appear that among the Superposers at least, scale is preserved pretty well. Silver is just a bit taller than Tails, as you would expect him to be, and he's about the same height as Knuckles. Actually, he's, if you measure from the heights of their noses, Knuckles is just a little bit taller, and Silver only comes out bigger because of his forehead frond, which doesn't really count to his height because, it's all hair. So, I chose to... My stage isn't wide enough to accommodate all the Superposes at the same time, at least not while they're standing shoulder to shoulder. So I decided to just put up Knuckles and Tails to show, because they are also original creations made by Jazzwares. And, the overall sculpt and paintwork is still great. It's just a shame that Tails and Knuckles are so much better in terms of the tightness of their joints. They stand fine. You don't have to worry about them flopping all over the place. I just wish that this silver figure wasn't so freaking floppy in the legs. I mean, his arms hold up almost fine. If only his hip and knee joints weren't so loose, he'd actually be pretty great. Comparing Silver to the original Sonic and Shadow Superposers, by the way, in case you think they look a little bit weird, that's because these are the original Toy Island versions of the molds, not the Jazzwares re-releases. Although mold-wise, the Jazzwares figures are exactly the same, the only difference being different paint application on the eyes, and maybe different plastic, but I can't be too sure about that one. He actually stands a little bit more stably than the other two, probably because of the way his hips go. And I gotta say, he's a definite improvement over the original Sonic and Shadow Superposers. He's just not as good as the Tails and Knuckles ones. So yeah, that's a problem. I guess it would be time for me to bring out the one version of this mold that I do have the Jazzwares version of. Due to a sale where he was only 50 cents, I actually did go out and buy the Supersonic version of the mold. It was some kind of, I think maybe they got the price. I think maybe they got the prices mixed up when they were trying to do a clearance of the flawed mold, but yeah, there's the Supersonic Superposer. This one actually is the Jazzwares version of that Superposer Sonic mold, though the only difference is, you know, the upturn spikes on the head, and I guess the plastic he's made out of is a little better. But yeah, seeing the new Silver, he clearly is at least an aesthetic improvement. He has better paint, and his molding does look to be a little bit more accurate to the game model than the previous Superposers were. And it's on par, sculpt-wise and paint-wise, with Tails and Knuckles, so don't get that wrong. The only problem is his structure. He's rather cheaply made, and that is the big problem with the Silver Superposer. I mean, look, I can at least poke Supersonic in the head and he won't flop over. I mean, this guy will flop over because he's from, that's like a 10-year-old toy. He has the excuse of being old and made by Toy Island. But Silver's brand new. He should be facing that problem. So, that's my verdict. The Silver Superposer. There's no real way to tell in the packaging if his joints are going to be loose like that, so I can't really recommend anything. If you know how to tighten up his joints, you might want to go for him. But unless you're really die-hard Supersonic fans, and you're really trying to collect the Superposer line, I'm pretty sure you can go ahead and skip this guy. Yeah. It pains me to say it, but that's what I gotta say. He's just not that great a figure for me to look past his flaws. And it kind of upsets me that this might be the last of the Superposers. I would have liked the last Superposer to be Amy Rose, but instead we get Silver, the guy who is only important in the single-player campaign of one game. Every other game he either appears as a cameo character in the multiplayer that has nothing to do in the plot, or a boss. He's just... Poor Silver. I like Silver, but he's just not that important a guy to get a Superposer before Amy Rose does. Or even Dr. Eggman, for that matter. Although I guess making Dr. Eggman to be in scale with the Superposers, you probably have to make him a 10-inch figure. But I'm digressing. Even a Superposer Metal Sonic would have been better. And that's still digression. This is Toy Customizer Wakeangel2K1 signing off.